Beneath the creaking help-wanted sign that swayed in the cold evening breeze, an alien woman sat in silence, her tall frame hunched slightly, silver eyes glowing faintly under the fading light, while her hands gripped the edges of a weathered cloak pulled tight against her. People passed her by as if she were invisible, some quickening their pace, others whispering and pointing, but no one stopped, not even out of pity. She did not beg, did not raise her voice, did not move, as though rooted to the cracked pavement beneath her, waiting for something or someone. The city around her buzzed with life, vendors shouting, children running, workers spilling out of factories, but she seemed like a figure torn out of another world, dropped into a place that did not know what to do with her. Hours passed, the sun dipped behind the metal towers, and neon lights began to hum to life, yet she remained in her spot, still as stone, watching the swinging sign as though it carried a promise she refused to let go. The air grew colder, and the shadows stretched longer, but she did not leave, her determination sharper than her fear. Few had the courage to look her in the eye, for her gaze carried both sorrow and strength, and to meet it was to feel something unsettling, as if she held secrets no human dared to ask about. Then, from across the street, a young mechanic named Daniel noticed her while locking up his small workshop. He had seen unusual things in his life, broken machines, strange ships docked briefly at the harbor, but never an alien sitting alone beneath a human sign, waiting as though the city itself had called her. Curiosity tugged at him, and though common sense whispered to walk away like everyone else, he found himself crossing the street, his boots echoing against the quiet stone. When he stopped in front of her, he saw more than just a lost stranger. He saw exhaustion carved into her sharp features, clothes torn from travel, and eyes that, for all their strangeness, carried a fragile hope. For a moment, he almost turned back, unsure of what to say. But something in her patience unsettled him. Why would someone sit all day in a place where no one cared? He studied her, and she studied him, silence stretching between them, heavy with unspoken words. The sign above rattled again in the wind, the words "help wanted" glowing under a flickering streetlight, and Daniel felt the strange pull of fate, as though that sign was not meant for just anyone, but perhaps for her, and now for him too. The crowd moved on around them, the city uncaring, yet the moment hung frozen, a quiet tension building in the air, whispering that if Daniel spoke, something in both their lives would change forever. Daniel stood before the alien woman, unsure of whether to speak or to simply walk away. Yet something inside him refused to let the moment end. So he cleared his throat and asked quietly if she was waiting for someone. But instead of answering directly, she lifted her gaze to the swinging sign above them, and whispered in broken but steady English, "I can help. I will work. Please take me." And her words struck him harder than he expected, because they carried not only desperation, but also determination, as if she had been holding them inside all day waiting for the right person to hear. The streetlight flickered overhead, painting her face in alternating shadows, and Daniel realized that she was not just stranded but abandoned, left in a city that had no place for her. He hesitated, torn between caution and compassion, knowing full well that humans were discouraged from taking aliens into their homes without clearance. Yet as he studied her trembling hands and tired posture, he felt a weight in his chest that told him he could not leave her there to fade into the night, like an unwanted shadow. The city around them carried on with its noise and movement, but to Daniel, the world narrowed to this quiet exchange beneath the worn sign. And in that silence, he made his decision. He reached out his hand, not fully sure she would take it. And when she finally did, her grip was firm, her skin cool but not unpleasant, and her eyes widened with a spark of something that looked almost like relief. Without another word, he guided her across the street toward his workshop, and though heads turned and whispers followed, he kept walking, each step feeling heavier with the knowledge that he was making a choice that others would judge. The alien moved carefully beside him, her cloak brushing against the ground, and Daniel wondered what kind of journey had led her here, what storms or battles she had endured to end up beneath a simple human sign. When they reached the door of his shop, he unlocked it slowly, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone to stop them, but no one did. And when the heavy metal door closed behind them, the city's noise faded away. replaced by the still hum of machines and the faint smell of oil and steel. Inside the dim light of the workshop, she seemed to relax slightly, her shoulders no longer as tense, her eyes scanning the tools and broken parts scattered across the tables, with a strange mix of curiosity and recognition, as if she had once known such places well. Daniel watched her carefully, still uncertain of what he had brought into his life, but also aware that he had crossed an invisible line, and there would be no turning back. The air felt charged, as though the choice he had made was bigger than either of them could see. And while he locked the door behind them, a thought flickered in his mind whatever path lay ahead. It had already begun the moment he decided to answer her silent call. The workshop was dim and cluttered, the air heavy with the smell of oil and metal dust, and as the alien woman stepped inside she paused, her silver eyes drifting across shelves of half-repaired machines, stacks of tools and wires hanging like vines, as though she had entered a place both familiar and foreign at the same time. And Daniel, watching her closely, could not shake the feeling that she saw more in his workshop than he ever had. She moved slowly, brushing her hand over the surface of a broken generator, her long fingers tracing its edge with such care that Daniel wondered if she could sense its flaws, without even opening it. And when he asked if she understood what it was, she gave the smallest nod, whispering in her broken English, "Engine, but tired. I can make it breathe again." The way she spoke sent a chill down his spine, not from fear but from awe, because she spoke of machines not as objects but as living things, and in her voice there was knowledge too deep to ignore. Daniel wanted to ask more, to know who she truly was and what had brought her here, but her eyes carried memories too heavy to disturb, and so he simply gestured toward a stool and offered her rest, though she refused, instead circling the workshop with quiet purpose, as if testing whether this place could become her refuge. The silence between them grew thicker, broken only by the faint hum of a lamp, until finally she turned to him and revealed fragments of her past. Speaking slowly, her words stitched with effort, she had been part of a crew, an engineer on a starship that traveled far beyond human routes. But the ship had been ambushed, torn apart in orbit above the planet, and she had fallen with the wreckage, one of the few who survived. She spoke of fire in the sky, of cries lost in the void, and though she told it without tears, Daniel felt the weight of her loss pressing into the room like a storm cloud. Stranded, she had searched for help, but humans avoided her, treated her like a threat or a beggar, until at last she found the sign and chose to wait, believing perhaps someone would see her not as a danger, but as a chance. Daniel listened, unsettled yet moved, realizing the quiet figure before him carried not only survival, but also skills that far surpassed what most humans could dream of. He felt a strange mix of fear and responsibility, knowing that by bringing her here he had taken her story into his own life, and while part of him wished to keep his distance, another part recognized that her presence could change everything. She looked at him then, standing among the machines, and though she did not ask with words, her eyes held the unspoken question: would he let her stay, or would he send her back into the cold streets where she had waited all day? Daniel hesitated, torn between caution and the stirring of something greater, and in that charged silence, the workshop itself seemed to hold its breath, as if aware that the answer he gave would set their future into motion. Daniel decided the best way to know if she truly belonged in his workshop was to test her skills. So he guided her toward a broken generator that had sat in the corner for months, a stubborn machine that had drained his patience with every failed attempt. And with a half-apologetic smile he told her she could try if she wished, though he doubted anything would come of it. Yet the moment her fingers touched the casing her expression changed, her silver eyes narrowing with focus, as though she were listening to the heartbeat of something unseen. She crouched low, whispering words in her own language so quietly that Daniel could not understand. Then she began moving with a precision that startled him. Every bolt turned with ease, every wire handled with care, and though her hands bore the weariness of long travel, they worked with a steady confidence that only years of practice could give. Daniel stood back, leaning against his workbench, watching in silence as she dismantled the generator, not with force, but with patience, spreading its insides across the table like pieces of a puzzle she already knew how to solve. and in less than an hour the mess of tangled coils and cracked panels had been transformed into a clean framework ready for renewal. When she asked for tools, her voice soft but commanding, Daniel handed them over without question, almost forgetting this was the same machine he had cursed at only weeks ago. And as sparks danced under her touch, a low hum began to fill the room, faint at first, then growing steady, until the generator gave a pulse of light so strong that the workshop glowed with fresh power. Daniel felt his breath catch in his chest, stunned not only because the impossible had happened, but because she had done it with such grace that it looked more like art than labor. And when she finally straightened, her hands marked with grease and her cloak smeared with dust, she gave him a small, hesitant smile, a fragile expression that revealed the quiet pride she had buried beneath fear. For a moment, the air was still, charged with the echo of what had just taken place, and Daniel realized this alien was no burden, no lost wanderer begging for scraps, but a builder, a healer of machines, someone whose skills could bring life where there was none. Word traveled quickly through the neighborhood, for light spilled out of Daniel's shop brighter than usual, and curious eyes peered in through the glass, whispering about the tall, strange figure working beside the human mechanic. Customers who had long ignored Daniel's small business began to stir with interest, drawn by rumors of a helper who could fix what others deemed hopeless. Yet Daniel knew this attention was a double-edged blade, for in a city where suspicion ruled stronger than compassion, such whispers could just as easily bring danger. Still, as he looked at her standing beside the humming generator, her silver eyes reflecting the glow, he felt something he had not felt in years: hope, and though the future pressed close with uncertainty, he could not shake the sense that this was only the beginning of something larger than either of them could yet imagine. The workshop had grown busier than Daniel had ever known. Machines that once gathered dust now returned to life under the alien woman's careful touch. And though customers brought their broken tools and engines with eager smiles, Daniel could not ignore the feeling that the more people noticed her, the more danger crept closer. And that unease became real one cold night when a sharp knock rattled his door. Long after closing hours, he opened it to find Marcus, an old friend who worked for the city patrol, standing in the dim glow of the streetlight with his jaw tight and his eyes scanning the shadows, as though someone might be listening. And before Daniel could even ask, Marcus stepped inside and shut the door firmly, lowering his voice to a warning. "They know," he said, glancing toward the corner where the alien woman was quietly organizing tools. Her posture tensed the moment she sensed the change in atmosphere. Marcus explained that word of an alien working in a human shop had reached the wrong ears, and the council had already marked her as unregistered and therefore a risk, meaning it was only a matter of time before patrol units arrived to take her away, not to protect her, but to remove her from sight. And Daniel could hear in his friend's tone that mercy would not be part of the plan. The alien woman's hands froze over the tools, her silver eyes flicking between the two men, and though she said nothing, her silence carried the heavy truth that she had lived through this kind of fear before, hunted not for what she had done but for what she was. Daniel felt his stomach knot, torn between reason and instinct, for to defy the council meant risking fines, losing his shop, even arrest. Yet to hand her over meant betraying not only her, but also the bond that had grown between them. Since the night he saw her beneath the sign, Marcus leaned closer, his voice urgent now, reminding Daniel that the patrol would not wait long, urging him to hide her or send her away before it was too late. And in that moment Daniel realized the choice he made had already set him against the tide of the city's rules. The generator hummed softly in the corner, a reminder of what she had given him, of how she had taken lifeless scraps and made them whole again. And Daniel knew that if she could do that with machines, perhaps she could also help rebuild something broken in humanity itself. But only if he stood with her. He looked at Marcus, at the door that might soon burst open with armored men, then at the alien woman whose eyes were wide but steady, and he understood that this was no longer about kindness or pity, it was about courage. The workshop seemed to close in around them, the air heavy with the weight of his decision. And though Daniel had no plan, only fear and determination, he heard himself say firmly, "I won't let them take her." And the words echoed in the quiet room like the strike of a hammer. sealing his fate and hers in the same moment. The night fell heavier than usual, and Daniel barely slept, every sound from the street making him jolt upright, as if the patrol might already be breaking down his door. And when the morning came, pale light spilling through the dusty windows, he found the alien woman already awake, standing silently beside the repaired generator as though she sensed the storm about to arrive. The day dragged with uneasy quiet, no customers daring to visit after rumors spread. And by evening, Daniel's fear became reality. Dark shapes moved at the end of the street, patrol units in black armor advancing with the cold precision of machines, their boots striking the ground in unison, and neighbors peered from windows, whispering and pointing toward the mechanic's shop that had suddenly become the center of attention. Daniel's heart pounded, but instead of retreating, he stepped outside, standing firmly in front of his door, his arms crossed though his knees threatened to give way. And when the lead officer demanded the alien woman be handed over, his voice shook only for a moment before he shouted back, "She stays here." The patrol spread out, their weapons gleaming under the streetlights, and the crowd that had gathered watched with mixed expressions of fear and curiosity. But before the officers could press forward, the workshop behind Daniel came alive with light as the alien woman activated the generator. She had restored. A surge of energy rushed through the wires, spilling into the block, and in an instant the dark street lit up brighter than it had in years. Lamps glowed, engines sputtered to life, broken signs flickered back into brilliance, and the stunned crowd gasped at the sight. The officers hesitated, their rigid formation faltering as the people around them began to murmur, not in fear but in awe, realizing that the alien they had been told to avoid had brought life and power back to their forgotten corner of the city. Daniel raised his voice again, steadier now, telling the patrol and everyone watching that she was not a danger but a gift, that she had waited beneath a sign not for pity but for purpose. And it was humanity's blindness that nearly left her to rot in silence. The alien woman stepped out then, no longer hiding beneath her cloak, her tall frame illuminated by the glow of the lights, and though she said nothing, the strength in her presence spoke louder than words, her silver eyes reflecting the hope of the crowd. The officers exchanged uncertain glances, their orders clashing with the shift in the people's hearts, and for the first time, Daniel saw fear not in the alien, but in those who had come to take her. The silence stretched until finally the lead officer barked a command to withdraw, and the patrol retreated down the street, their authority fractured. The neighbors who had once turned away now gathered closer, not to scorn but to thank, and Daniel, standing beside the alien woman, felt the weight of the long path behind them lift. She looked at him, her faint smile carrying both gratitude and something deeper. And Daniel understood that their lives had changed forever, no longer strangers bound by chance, but allies bound by choice, and perhaps even the first proof that humanity's greatest strength was not its machines or its rules, but its willingness to stand for those who had no one else.